the cinnamon roll aroma and the dream. As a full-time ride-hailing driver, she spent over 10 hours navigating the traffic of Los Angeles every day, and the mileage on her dashboard had long exceeded 200,000 miles. When she pushed open the door, the sweet aroma of cinnamon rolls wafted through the living room. Her mother Martha was placing freshly baked pastries into a glass plate, while her father Thomas sat on the sofa reading the Los Angeles Times, his reading glasses slipping down to his nose. The family's golden retriever Max trotted over with a wagging tail, its paws clicking lightly on the floor as it nuzzled Lillian's palm. Home early today? Martha turned around, flour dusted on her apron, smile. She was always like this, even though Lillian was an adult, she still prepared warm pastries for her when she came home, just as she had when Lillian was the little girl coming home from school with a backpack. For Lillian's birthday last year, Martha had even learned to make her favorite red velvet cake. Though the cream was unevenly spread, it had made Lillian cry secretly for a long time. Lillian didn't answer. She just walked to the center of the living room, her hands clutching the hem of her clothes, her knuckles white from tension. The warm yellow floor lamp shone on her face, revealing the hesitation she had hidden in her eyes for so long. She had kept this secret for 20 years, since she could remember, the world had been a blur of light and shadow. The doctor said she had congenital retinitis pigmentosa, and her vision would gradually deteriorate with age, but she had always pretended she could see. In elementary school, she would ask her desk mate to read the content on the blackboard to her in advance, then secretly write it down in her notebook. In middle school, during the sports meet, she ran along the edge of the track by memory but still fell, scraping her knee badly, yet she laughed and said she was careless. Later, as a ride-hailing driver, she relied on voice navigation and addresses reported by passengers. Once, she encountered a drunk passenger who gave wrong directions, and she drove around half of Los Angeles before dropping him off. When she got home, she cried in her room for a long time, afraid her secret would be discovered. "Mom, Dad, there's something I need to tell you." Lillian's voice trembled slightly. Max seemed to sense her nervousness, lying obediently at her feet, its head resting on her shoe, tail gently brushing her ankle. Thomas put down the newspaper, and Martha stopped what she was doing. They exchanged a glance, both seeing confusion in each other's eyes. In their minds, Lillian had always been an independent and strong girl. When she graduated from the University of California, Los Angeles, she held her outstanding graduate certificate and smiled, saying she would make them live a good life through her own efforts. After becoming a ride-hailing driver, she worked from early morning till late at night but never complained about being tired. She often bought them gifts too. Thomas's reading glasses and Martha's cashmere scarf were all carefully chosen by her. "Actually, I'm blind." Lillian finally said the words. The moment the sound fell, the air in the living room seemed to freeze. The sweet scent of cinnamon rolls suddenly turned pungent. Max whimpered softly, nuzzling her leg as if to comfort her. The newspaper in Thomas's hand fell to the floor with a crash, and his reading glasses slid to his chin. He opened his mouth but couldn't make a sound for a long time. Finally, he said tremblingly, "Lillian, what are you saying? When did you?" He remembered when Lillian was little, she always liked to sit on his lap and point out the window, saying, "Dad, look, that bird is so beautiful." Now he realized those words were all lies his daughter had made up to keep him from worrying. Since birth. Lillian's eyes turned red, and tears finally fell. "I know you haven't had it easy. Thomas, you work on the construction site, enduring over 100 degrees Fahrenheit in summer and working in the cold wind in winter. Martha, you're a cashier in the supermarket, standing for 8 hours a day and putting up with customers' rudeness. I was afraid you'd worry, so I kept pretending I could see. At school, I'd memorize textbook content in advance and answer exam questions from memory. Later, as a ride-hailing driver, I relied on voice navigation and passenger addresses. I was scared every day, scared of being found out, Scared you'd be sad if you knew. Martha covered her mouth, tears streaming through her fingers. She remembered when Lillian was little, she always sat by the window at dusk, saying she loved watching the sunset. But now she realized Lillian couldn't even see the color of the sunset back then. She walked to Lillian and gently hugged her daughter. Silly child, why are you so silly? We're your family. We'll face any difficulties together. Thomas bent down to pick up the newspaper, his fingers trembling constantly. He walked to Lillian and patted her shoulder gently, his voice hoarse. Yes, why didn't you tell us earlier? Dad may not be capable, but I can help you find a way. He remembered that every time he got paid, he saved most of the money to save up for a house for Lillian. Now he realized his daughter had been living in a lie, and he, as a father, knew nothing about it. Just then, Thomas suddenly frowned, pulled on the sofa armrest and slowly sat down, fine sweat beads oozing from his forehead. Lillian, keenly aware of his movement, and reached out to help him, but Thomas dodged. Actually, Dad has a secret too. Thomas sighed and rolled up his trouser leg. His left leg was wearing a metal brace, the skin reddish from long-term pressure, and there was a long scar at the knee. I fell at the construction site 3 years ago, falling from a 3-meter-high scaffold. The doctor said I had a lumbar spine injury and my lower limbs would gradually become paralyzed. But if I don't work, we have a mortgage of over $3,000 a month, your insurance premiums, and daily expenses. What can we do? So I pretended nothing was wrong. Every morning, I secretly take painkillers, fix my leg with the brace, and still go to the construction site to carry bricks. Lillian was stunned. She remembered that every time she came home, she would see Thomas sitting on the sofa rubbing his legs. At that time, she thought he was just tired, but now she knew it was pain tormenting him. She walked to Thomas, held his hand, and tears fell on the back of his hand. Dad, why are you so silly? What would we do if something happened to you? Martha came over, held Thomas's other hand, and tears fell on the back of his hand. You stubborn old man, why didn't you tell me? We could have figured it out together. At worst, we can sell the house and move to a smaller one. I didn't want you to worry. Thomas smiled, his corner of the eye wrinkles filled with exhaustion. Now it's good. Everyone has told their secrets, and there's nothing left to hide. He looked at Lillian and Martha, feeling both guilty and relieved, guilty that he couldn't give them a better life, but relieved that they could finally be honest with each other. Martha wiped her tears, took a deep breath, and suddenly seemed to make up her mind. She walked to the fireplace in the living room, took down an exquisite silver box from the mantelpiece. The box was carved with complex patterns and looked very old. When opened, it contained a brooch inlaid with a sapphire as big as a pigeon's egg, shining brilliantly under the light. Actually, I'm not the Martha you think I am. Her voice suddenly changed, no longer the gentle tone usual, but instead carrying a hint of authority. I'm a princess of Wakanda. Back then, because of a palace coup, my father was killed. I escaped to the United States under the protection of guards, taking the alias Martha, just wanting to find someone who would treat me sincerely and not care about my identity. Over the years, I've watched Thomas work hard without complaining, and seen Lillian strive to live even though she can't see. I know you've passed my test. She took a photo from her pocket. In the photo, she was wearing a gorgeous dress, standing in front of a magnificent palace, completely different from her now. Lillian and Thomas were both stunned. Max also looked up, tilting its head at Martha, as if confused too. Thomas rubbed his eyes, unable to believe his ears. You're a princess. Then why did you live a hard life with me? Martha smiled and said, because I wanted to find someone who truly loves me, not my identity and wealth. The years I've spent with you have been the happiest of my life. Martha picked up the brooch and pressed the gem lightly. Suddenly, the sound of helicopter propellers came from outside the window. Although Lillian couldn't see, she could hear the sound of propellers getting closer and closer, along with the clinking of metal, which made the windows tremble slightly. "Come, I'll take you somewhere." Martha took Lillian and Thomas by the hands and walked toward the door. The moment she opened the door, Lillian could feel intense light. More than 20 black helicopters were parked on both sides of the driveway, with golden totems printed on their fuselages. The wind generated by the rotating propellers made the lawn by the roadside sway. More than 30 black SUVs were lined up in neat formation, their headlights illuminating the entire neighborhood, turning the night as bright as day. Several men in black suits walked over. They were tall and serious, bowing respectfully to Martha. "Your Highness, everything is ready." Martha nodded, signaling them to take Lillian and Thomas to the car. Lillian was helped into an SUV, the seat as soft as a cloud. The car was also covered with wool carpets and played soft classical music. The windows were tinted, blocking the outside light, but she could vaguely see the scene outside. Neighbors were standing at their doorsteps, curiously watching everything here, some even taking out their phones to take photos. After the car started, it drove smoothly on the road. She could hear the sound of helicopters hovering overhead and the sound of waves in the distance, probably heading toward the Pacific Ocean. After an unknown amount of time, the car stopped. Someone helped Lillian get out of the car. She could feel the sea breeze blowing, take a faint salty smell and moist air, which made her skin moist. "This is Hakuna Matata Island, our Wakandan overseas base." Martha's voice sounded in her ear. "Here, there is the most advanced medical technology that can cure your illnesses." Lillian could hear the sound of waves crashing against the beach and the chirping of birds. The air was filled with the fragrance of flowers and plants, making her feel refreshed and relaxed. Lillian was taken into a white building, the walls made of special materials that felt smooth to the touch. The air inside was filled with a faint herbal scent and a hint of disinfectant. Someone examined her, and cold instruments moved in front of her eyes. Although she couldn't see, she could feel a warm force wrapping around her eyes, making her feel very comfortable. After a while, someone said to her, "Miss Lillian, you can try opening your eyes now." Lillian slowly opened her eyes. The blurred light and shadow gradually became clear. She could see Martha's face, the wrinkles at the corners of her eyes, and the joy in her eyes. She could see Thomas's white hair and the smile on his face. She could also see Max looking at her with a wagging tail, its tongue sticking out, looking very cute. She could even see the blue sky outside the window, as blue as a gem, the waves on the sea, shining with golden light, and the seagulls flying in the distance, their wings sparkling in the sun. "I can see!" Lillian exclaimed excitedly, tears falling again, this time, tears of joy. She reached out and touched the table beside her, clearly feeling its texture. She had never felt this way before. Thomas also came over. He no longer needed a brace for his leg and could walk normally. He smiled and said, "It's amazing. I feel 20 years younger." He took a few steps and even jumped, his face full of excitement. The pain of many years had finally disappeared, and he could finally walk like a normal person. The family celebrated on the island for a long time. Martha introduced Wakandan culture to them and took them to visit the laboratory in the base. There were many advanced equipment in the laboratory, and the staff were busy in white coats. For the first time, Lillian truly saw the world. Every flower and every leaf made her feel novel. She squatted on the grass, looking at a small purple flower with dewdrops on its petals, crystal clear. Max was also happy, running around on the grass, chasing butterflies. Sometimes it would run over with a branch in its mouth, asking Lillian to play with it. But just then, Max suddenly stopped, looked up, and barked a few times at the air. It ran to Lillian with a wagging tail, nuzzled her hand with its head, then suddenly stood up and said in a human voice, "Lillian, stop dreaming. Wake up quickly." Its voice was a little hoarse but carried a hint of urgency. Lillian was stunned. She thought she had misheard, but Max's voice sounded again, "You have gas poisoning. Come with me. With that, Max pushed open the door beside him with its paw and pulled Lillian's hem of the clothes to go outside. Its paws were strong, forcing Lillian to follow. The scene in front of her suddenly changed. The white building disappeared, replaced by her own living room. The sweet scent of cinnamon rolls turned into a pungent gas smell, making people dizzy. Thomas was lying on the sofa, his face pale, lips purple, breathing weakly. Martha was also lying on the floor, eyes closed, motionless. Max jumped onto the table, pressed the switch of the gas stove with its paw. With a click, the gas stove went out. Then it ran to the window, pushed open it with its body. Fresh air poured in, slightly relieving the gas smell in the room. It also picked up the phone on the coffee table, pressed the number 911 with its nose. The phone screen lit up, showing that it was dialing. This is San Fernando Valley, address 123 Oak Street. Our house has a gas leak, and someone is poisoned. Max shouted into the phone, its voice anxious, tail wagging constantly. It could hear the voice from the other end of the phone but couldn't understand, so it kept repeating the address. Soon, the sound of ambulance sirens came from outside, getting closer and closer. Max ran to the door, scratching it with its paws, making a whimpering sound. When the medical staff came in, it pointed at Thomas on the sofa and Martha on the floor. Speak anxiously, save them quickly. They're dying. Its paws kept scraping the floor, as if urging the medical staff. The medical staff were stunned. They looked at the talking dog, then at the two poisoned people, their faces showing surprise. But they quickly reacted, took out first aid equipment, put oxygen masks on Thomas and Martha, and took out an electrocardiogram machine to examine them. But just then, one of the medical staff suddenly grabbed Max by the neck and dragged it outside. This dog seems mentally ill. Take it away first so it doesn't interfere with our rescue. He was very strong, and Max couldn't break free at all. You're mistaken. Save my owners quickly. Max struggled, scratching several marks on the medical staff's arm, leaving bloodstains. It could see Thomas's eyes move slightly, and it became even more anxious, afraid something would happen to its owners. Another medical staff sighed and said to his companion, "This dog is so poor thing. Its owners died in a car accident last week on Highway 405. A truck ran a red light and hit their car, which was completely wrecked. It must have been unable to bear the blow and had hallucinations, thinking its owners are still alive." His voice carried a hint of sympathy, and his eyes were full of pity. When Max heard these words, it was like being struck by lightning and stopped struggling. It remembered the scene last week. Thomas was driving Martha and Lillian to the supermarket, and it was sitting in the back seat, looking at the scenery outside the window. Suddenly, a large truck rushed over from the side. With a loud bang, the car lost control and spun on the road. Glass shards flew, scratching its paws. The harsh sound of brakes and screams echoed in its ears, making it dizzy. It climbed out of the car, wanting to find its owners, but the car had already caught fire. Firefighters pulled it away, saying the people inside were gone. Later, the police took it away and temporarily fostered it in an animal shelter. Every day, it looked forward to its owners coming to pick it up, but what it waited for was the news of their death. "No, they're not dead." Max's voice became hoarse, tears falling from the corners of its eyes onto the floor. Just as the ambulance was about to close its doors, several people suddenly rushed over from outside. They were wearing police uniforms, holding batons, and shouted at the medical staff, "Don't move. You're not medical staff at all." Their voices were loud, making people's ears numb. The medical staff's faces changed, and they tried to drive away, but it was too late. The several people rushed over, pressed them to the ground, and cuffed their wrists with a click. One of the policemen showed his ID and said, "We're from the Los Angeles Police Department. We received a report that someone is pretending to be medical staff to steal dogs, specifically stealing pet dogs whose owners have died and then selling them on the black market. His eyes were serious, and his tone carried a hint of anger. Max was stunned. It looked at the policeman, then at the back of the ambulance. Lillian, Thomas, and Martha were standing there, their faces still a little pale but in good spirits. Lillian was still holding a cinnamon roll with shiny frosting on it. You're not dead? Max ran over, nuzzling Lillian's leg, its tail wagging constantly. Lillian squatted down, stroked Max's head, and smiled. Of course we're not dead. The car accident last week was just a minor incident. The car was only slightly damaged, and we only suffered minor injuries. We stayed in the hospital for 2 days and came back. It's you secretly ate the poisonous mushrooms growing in the backyard yesterday, and since then you've been acting strange, always barking at the air and running back to your room to hide. She held up the cinnamon roll in her hand and offered it to Max's mouth. Isn't this your favorite? Try it quickly. Max finally understood, everything before was an illusion. Lillian wasn't blind, Thomas wasn't paralyzed, and Martha wasn't a princess. Those helicopters, aircraft carriers, and Hakuna Matata Island were all absurd dreams it had after eating poisonous mushrooms. It lowered its head in embarrassment, licked the cinnamon roll in Lillian's hand. The sweet scent spread in its mouth, making it feel very happy. Martha came over, holding a dog bowl with Max's favorite beef can inside. The beef chunks in the can were large and still steaming. No more eating random things from now on, okay? If you want snacks, just tell us, and we'll buy them for you. She stroked Max's ears, her eyes full of tenderness. Max barked, picked up the can, ran to the sofa, and lay down on the floor to eat. The sweet aroma of cinnamon rolls still filled the living room. The light from the floor lamp was warm and soft. The Christmas lights outside the window were twinkling, and the night in Los Angeles was still quiet and beautiful.